There's a song that begins with a man speaking quietly into the silence, not singing yet, just talking, describing a woman he lost, the way she walked, the way she moved through the world, the emptiness she left behind. And then the music swells, and the voice rises, and millions of people who heard it for the first time felt something shift inside their chest that they could not explain. That song was Have You Seen Her? The group was the Chi-Lites, the city was Chicago, and the story behind that sound, where it came from, what it cost the men who made it, and where each of them ended up, is one that Chicago has never fully told the way it deserves to be told. They started the way most great soul groups started, as teenagers with nothing but talent and time and the absolute refusal to believe that the neighborhood they were born in was the limit of what they could become. In 1959, a group of young men from Chicago's South Side formed a vocal group called the Chanteurs. Eugene Record was there at the beginning, learning guitar from his grandfather, shaping harmonies with his friends. Robert "Squirrel" Lester was there too. They sang on street corners and at house parties and in talent shows, building the kind of raw, instinctive chemistry that no amount of professional training can manufacture. When the group evolved and expanded, Marshall Thompson and Creedle Red Jones came in from another local group called the Desideros. Clarence Johnson completed the lineup. By the early 1960s, they were performing as the Hi-Lites, recording small singles on local Chicago labels, getting marginal attention, chasing something larger without quite knowing what it would look like when they found it. In 1964, seeking to honor their hometown while also differentiating themselves from another group already using the Hi-Lites name, they added a C and became Marshall and the Chi-Lites. By the end of that year, Johnson had left, and the name was shortened simply to the Chi-Lites. Eugene Record was quietly becoming the group's dominant creative voice, writing songs, developing arrangements, shaping a sound that nobody else in Chicago was making. In 1968, Brunswick Records producer Carl Davis signed them. 4 years of patient, grinding work was about to pay off in ways none of them could fully anticipate. The hits began arriving in 1969. Give It Away reached the top 10 on the R&B charts. Are You My Woman followed. And then came 1971, when everything changed at once. The Chi-Lites released Give More Power to the People, a funky, politically charged anthem that proved this group was not just making love songs, they were paying attention to the world around them, and they had things to say about it. The song reached the top of the R&B charts and announced the group as something more dimensional than the sweet soul balladeers most Chicago acts were content to remain. But it was the ballads that made them immortal. Eugene Record wrote Have You Seen Her partly as a tribute to his first wife, Sandra Scott, who had left him. The song opens with a monologue, a man walking through the city, remembering a woman, seeing her face everywhere and nowhere at once. Then the harmonies of Thompson, Lester, and Jones build beneath Eugene's aching lead like weather gathering before a storm. The song reached #1 on the R&B chart and #3 on the pop chart in 1971. It sold over 1 million copies. It earned a gold disc, and it was only the opening act. Oh Girl arrived in 1972, and it went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. All the way to the top. The entire country heard it. The lonely harmonica opening, the confession in Eugene's voice. Not the sound of a man performing vulnerability, but the sound of a man who is actually genuinely in it. Oh girl, I'd be in trouble if you left me now. 11 consecutive top 10 R&B hits between 1969 and 1974. 21 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 pop chart. 5 gold records. The Chi-Lites were not just a successful group, they were the defining sound of early 1970s Chicago soul. And then the fade began. Not dramatically, not in a single catastrophic moment, but steadily, the way a light dims rather than goes out all at once. Creedle Red Jones was the bass voice underneath everything, the low, steady anchor that gave the group's harmonies their depth and gravity. Born in Chicago, he had been part of the original merger that created the group, the man who sang the notes nobody else could reach. By 1973, internal tensions and conflicts over the group's direction pushed him out. He departed, and the lineup that had created all those hits was never quite the same again. Jones would return briefly, leave again, and return once more over the years. He died in 1994, leaving behind the memory of a voice that most listeners never knew had been the foundation of some of the most beautiful soul music Chicago ever produced. And then the fade began. Not dramatically, not in a single catastrophic moment, but steadily, the way a light dims rather than goes out all at once. Creedell Red Jones was the bass voice underneath everything, the low, steady anchor that gave the group's harmonies their depth and gravity. Born in Chicago, he had been part of the original merger that created the group, the man who sang the notes nobody else could reach. By 1973, internal tensions and conflicts over the group's direction pushed him out. He departed, and the lineup that had created all those hits was never quite the same again. Jones would return briefly, leave again, and return once more over the years. He died in 1994, leaving behind the memory of a voice that most listeners never knew had been the foundation of some of the most beautiful soul music Chicago ever produced. Eugene Record himself was the next to go. In 1976, as Brunswick Records was collapsing under legal and financial difficulties, Eugene made the decision to leave the group he had built and pursue a solo career at Warner Brothers. 3 solo albums followed: the Eugene Record, Trying to Get to You, Welcome to My Fantasy, and all 3 failed commercially. The voice that had carried millions of listeners to emotional places they did not know they could go could not seem to replicate its magic alone, separated from the harmonies that had surrounded and elevated it. He returned to the Chi-Lites in 1980 for another run, recording several more albums and scoring minor hits with Hot on a Thing Called Love. But by 1988, something deeper had shifted in him. While alone in his own home recording studio working on a Chi-Lites project, Eugene Records said he heard something he could not explain, a voice that he understood as God, telling him to change the direction of his life. He struggled with what that meant for months, and then he left the group a final time to pursue gospel music and ministry. He released a gospel album in 1997 called Let Him In. He worked with a praise and worship team at his church in Chicago. He was still alive to see his classic song Are You My Woman sampled by Beyoncé for Crazy in Love in 2004, earning him a shared Grammy Award decades after he first sang it. He told an interviewer he would give Beyoncé a big hug and say thank you. Eugene Booker Record died on July 22, 2005, at his daughter Jana's home in Hazel Crest, Illinois, after a long battle with lung cancer. His wife Jacqueline was at his side. He was 64 years old. He left behind more than 300 compositions, a Grammy Award, and a catalog of songs that have never stopped playing on radio stations around the world. His son Brian published a biography in 2015 called My Father in Lights. It was the story of a musical genius who made his greatest work in a burst between 1969 and 1974 and spent the rest of his life searching for peace in quieter rooms.
Robert "Squirrel" Lester had been with the Chi-Lites longer than almost anyone. He had been there at the very beginning, in 1959, as part of the original chanteurs, before the group had any of its other names. His second tenor voice was part of the harmonic foundation of every great record they made together. He stayed with Marshall Thompson through the lean years, through the lineup changes, through the decades when the hits had stopped coming and the group was simply working, night after night, because it was what they knew how to do. Squirrel Lester died in January 2010. He was 69 years old. His death left Marshall Thompson as the sole surviving founding member of the Chi-Lites, the last man standing from that original group of teenagers who had formed on Chicago's South Side in 1959. Marshall Thompson titled his autobiography exactly that, Last Man Standing. Born on August 24, 1942 in Chicago, Marshall Thompson was the quiet constant in everything the Chi-Lites ever did or became. He was not always the lead singer. He was not the primary songwriter, but he was the backbone,
the man who kept the group together when it wanted to come apart, who held the name and the legacy and the touring operation intact through every loss and departure. When Eugene left, Marshall kept going. When Red left, Marshall kept going. When Squirrel died, Marshall kept going. In 2014, he suffered a stroke. It affected his ability to walk distances. It did not affect his performances. He continued touring with a reconstituted version of the group, bringing in new members, keeping the harmonies alive, refusing to let what those men had built together dissolve quietly. On September 30th, 2021, Marshall Thompson stood on Hollywood Boulevard at a ceremony honoring the Chi-Lites with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The current group members stood beside him, his wife Tara Thompson, Fred Simon, Warren Tipton, and Mac Miller. And on that stage, Marshall spoke about the original members who were no longer there, Eugene Record, Robert Lester, and Creedle Jones, men who had built this legacy with him and did not live to see it receive this recognition. Beyoncé sampled Are You My Woman and made it the backbone of one of the biggest hits of the 21st century. Jay-Z used That's How Long on the Black Album. Generation after generation of artists has reached back into the Chi-Lites catalog and found something worth taking, worth transforming, worth keeping alive. That is what a legacy looks like from the outside. From the inside, it looks like Marshall Thompson standing at a podium on Hollywood Boulevard, accepting a star on behalf of men who could not be there. It looks like a photograph taken at a ceremony in Atlantic City, honoring music made by people who started with nothing and gave everything. Chicago made many things, but the sound of the Chi-Lites, that particular combination of vulnerability and elegance and political fire and heartache, came from a very specific group of people at a very specific moment in time, and it will not be made again. It does not need to be. It still exists. It still plays. It still finds the people who need it. Have you seen her? The answer, somehow, is always yes.